This week on Capital Connection, the White House issued an order wanting to see a pause on all federal grants and loans. And local Illinois lawmakers were not happy.
I'm hoping that we're going to get more clarity from this administration on what they're trying to do.
A freeze of that magnitude would affect nonprofits, state agencies, and different social safety net programs across the country. One of those agency heads, Carrie Ward with the Coalition Against Sexual Assault, joined us this week.
This just created a lot of disarray and a lot of uncertainty about people's jobs and the work that they do.
And House Republicans are suing the state over the legislative maps drawn way back in 2021. Find out why they think that the districts that you vote in are basically cheating.
It's some of the most egregious violations and use of terrible gerrymandering tactics anywhere in the country.
It's all coming up on Capital Connection.
From the Illinois State Capitol Rotunda, Capitol Bureau Chief Cole Henke is asking the tough questions. This is Capital Connection.
Welcome to Capital Connection. I'm Cole Henke. It all started with a memo from the Office of Management and Budget in the federal government. It said that President Trump issued an order that all federal grants and loans should be put on hold while the agencies assess the spending to make sure that falls in line with Trump's policy agenda. It would have been a totally unprecedented move by the federal government and especially Trump during his second term. And Illinois Democrats made sure to make it clear they were not happy with this decision. And it caused chaos as different agencies and nonprofits and social safety net programs tried to figure out how they would keep running without federal funding. A memo sent from the Federal Office of Management and Budget notified agency heads there would be a freeze on, quote, all activities related to obligation or disbursement of all federal financial assistance. From there, the agency was supposed to conduct a review to make sure spending fell in line with President Trump's policy agenda. But state leaders say even a brief pause could be devastating for programs that rely on this spending.
Whatever you're hearing from the Trump administration, understand that it has already affected working families, some of our most vulnerable.
A judge in Arizona put a pause on the plan until Monday, but that did not stop Illinois state leaders from taking turns attacking this idea. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski told the Capitol Bureau she has been getting calls all day from concerned constituents.
It is making an impact, and it is creating a lot of fear, a lot of panic. And so I'm hoping that we're going to get more clarity from this administration on what they're trying to do.
Attorney General Kwame Raoul joined other states in filing a lawsuit against the federal government and this order.
It will have a devastating impact on public safety, prosperity, and quality of life for all Americans and certainly citizens in the state of Illinois.
And Governor Pritzker detailed how the state was locked out of the federal Medicaid portal, where they file for reimbursements from federal money. A program the Trump administration said today would not be impacted, despite multiple states getting shut out of the portal shortly after the memo went out.
Now the administration would like us to believe that these were just coincidental website outages. Donald Trump and his administration have not earned the benefit of the doubt. They are either lying to us or they are critically incompetent.
On the campaign trail, Trump made it clear he wanted to cut spending, but how brazen the attempt was caught lawmakers off guard. But Illinois Republican leadership was not nearly as critical.
What are we afraid of? Why are we afraid of exposing how the money is being spent? That's the better question.
When we come back, we're joined by Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski to talk about the threat of the freeze and to talk about how she feels Democrats could take away some lessons from the 2024 election. We'll be right back.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome back. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski was one of many lawmakers blindsided by the threat of a federal funding freeze. We sat down this week to talk about the impact that could have. And we did talk prior to the White House rescinding the order entirely on Wednesday. But she still says this could just be a sign of things to come for the next 4 years. Here's our interview with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski. Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Great to be with you, Cole.
I feel like it's important. I should date this interview right now. We're talking Tuesday, shortly after noon. My first questions are about this new executive order we've seen come down from the Trump administration, essentially freezing federal grants. It's still unclear right now as to how widespread this freeze is, what the impact of it is. The thing we seem to know for sure is that it's going to have an impact on Medicaid services. What can you tell us about what you've heard so far, what's been communicated to your office, and what should people be on the lookout for?
Look, I think the executive order that came out this morning was deeply disturbing and I think created a lot of panic, not just in Washington, but I can tell you right here in central and southern Illinois. I have heard from my mayors throughout this district. I've heard from constituents that are very concerned about their individual benefits being impacted. I know that President Trump's administration is saying right now that with this executive order, individual benefits won't be impacted, but that's just not true. I mean, and you can see that specifically here in Illinois when we have tried to access the Medicaid portal. We are shut out of the Medicaid portal right now. And I can say for a lot of the communities throughout central and southern Illinois that rely on Medicaid reimbursement, those dollars for services that they provide to individual constituents right here in central and southern Illinois, it is making an impact and it is creating a lot of fear, a lot of panic. And so I'm hoping that we're going to get more clarity from this administration on what they're trying to do. I would say, first of all, the executive order, from what we understand, the legality of it is actually in very serious question. The people that have the power of the purse, the people that have the ability to actually pass a budget. We came together and did this on a bipartisan basis, Republicans and Democrats. That's the spending. Those are the checks that the Office of the Management and Budget need to be cutting. Congress has the power of the purse, not the presidency. And so that's why this is so deeply disturbing. He is rolling back spending obligations that have already been made to communities and to individuals. I would argue the reason that he's doing this is just foreshadowing of the tax debate that we're going to have ahead. President Trump wants to cut the corporate tax rate from 21% to 15%. To line the pockets of the super rich in this country and give corporations more of a tax break. Who's going to pay for that? And I am going to be fighting like hell to make sure that working families here in central and southern Illinois aren't impacted. And I think this executive order today is getting at that.
For this to just happen on a whim like this, on a random Monday night, and then everybody kind of have to navigate the fallout without a clear way forward present right now, is that just a sign of things to come for the next 4 years? It seems like he has no issue really pushing the legal limits of his power.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, and I think it's deeply disturbing when you consider the next 4 years ahead of us. It's not just this recent executive order freezing all federal grants and the legality, serious legal challenges that are going to be faced around that. You know, we had a flurry of executive orders last week as well that were also deeply concerning, one of which was challenging birthright citizenship, which is something that's actually enshrined in our Constitution. He wants to challenge that. And then you had other, I think, things, executive orders that were not respectful of the rule of law when he gave a blanket pardon to all of the January 6th insurrectionists, some of which hurt, injured, murdered, killed some law enforcement officers that were there on the site on the day of that incident, on that day of the insurrection. The fact that he gave them a blanket pardon, where is the respect for the rule of law? And that's something that I think is deeply disturbing. And today is just a further continuance of those real concerns that I have.
So the president has done all of what you were just talking about there. And
yeah.
An important thing to remember from this entire thing is the majority of voters in America voted for this. The popular vote, the Electoral College, they voted him into office. Is this what you think that voters were expecting when he went into office? Or was there another element that he had to his campaign that maybe not covered up, but at least was more important to voters than a lot of these actions that he has foreshadowed. I mean, when we talk about the immigration, mass deportations, what's referred to as the bloat in government, or the cut downs in spending. I mean, is that just do you think that the voters voted for this? And if they did, how do you turn that around?
I think voters voted for change. I think voters voted for someone that they believed were going to help bring down the cost of their everyday expenses, whether that's going to the grocery store, whether that's addressing the cost of childcare. I would tell you, Cole, that is not what this administration is focused on. I attended the swearing in, as you know, last week, and I would tell you the thing that stood out to me the most is on stage with him were 5 of the richest people in this world. Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon, Zuckerberg from Facebook, Tim Cook from Apple. What do those folks understand about the struggles of working families in central and southern Illinois? That's what Donald Trump sold to voters, is that was his top concern, but reflected on the very stage of where he was sworn into office, the opposite is what I saw. And so what I think my job is to make sure I stay focused on the concerns of working people, that I stay focused on addressing affordable housing, that I stay focused on addressing affordable child care, bringing down the cost so people can afford. Those are the issues that keep people up at night. And I have not seen since the very beginning of even before he was sworn into office that has been his focus.
Right. Well, Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Joining us now to continue our conversation about the attempted freeze on federal funding is Carrie Ward with the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault.
Hi, Cole.
Welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Your organization is one of thousands that would have been impacted by a freeze like this. And just take me through when you kind of first learned that this could be an issue.
Yes.
And what that would do to the work that the coalition does.
Absolutely. So I first learned Monday night when there had been a leaked version of the memo that was posted online, the memo from the White House OMB. And we saw that it identified this plan to freeze federal funding for all these different organizations while there'd be this pause. And immediately, of course, that starts this whole domino effect of folks wondering, what does that mean? What does that look like? What does that mean for funding we've already had approved, that's been approved by Congress? What's going to happen here? So we, of course, notify our agencies, and we're reaching out to our funders because that notice is supposed to go to the federal agencies to tell them to pause, and that you'll be able to not draw down any further funding within 48 hours of that notice going out. The way our agencies work, all of our funding operates on a reimbursement basis. And so that means we have to spend the money, provide the service, spend the money, and then request reimbursement after the fact. And so even having 48 hours notice to potentially draw down any available funding is not a huge help to organizations like ours, where that's not how the system works anyway.
Is it days? Is it a day?
It's a matter of weeks, and in the best of times, it's maybe a matter of months. It's not a matter of years. It's not a matter of 4 to 6 months. It's a matter of 1 to 2 months. Because our programs don't operate with coffers that are just full of money that are there. That's not how nonprofits work. And so they don't have all of this rainy day money that's just available. They operate on providing services and being repaid. And so I think when we see something like this happen for dollars that are as guaranteed as grant funding can be, which always means that if there's a failure for that money to be available, then our federal grantors can tell us, hey, those dollars are no longer available.
And you just kind of touched on it as well. I'm curious, how do you continue to operate knowing that something like this, I guess, even though this order's been rescinded, are you comfortable now with federal funding?
No.
Will it be possible for you to be comfortable with that federal funding. I know
Yes.
we had you on last spring to talk about how there was a decrease in federal funding for the organization already. So this has been a constant fight you've been in now.
Yes, it
Does
absolutely
this
is.
just make it worse?
It does, because it creates a level of uncertainty at a layer that wasn't there previously. You know, previously what we knew is we struggled with the Federal Victim Crime Act funds, trying to, you know, we had the major cut in those funds in FY23. We worked with the state to try to establish more state funds, and after the end of FY24. Now we're at the point where we're actually already looking at facing a potential a future cut to VOCA funds again. And then to have this come in as another potential problem when what we know is that Congress appropriated these funds. And so it shouldn't be something that we're having to worry about. You know, it shouldn't be something that's on our minds. We have a contract for the full year. We should be able to provide those services for the full year. Having this, even with it being rescinded, which I'm truly happy about and truly grateful for, but it's now created doubt that we didn't have in the same way before about what's going to happen with our government funding in the future. Will we be facing this in a perhaps more coordinated, less confusing way in the future? I think we should be able to identify that when Congress has passed a budget, even if it's via a continuing resolution, we should be able to operate within that and not be concerned that we're going to receive memos that say your funding is paused or halted.
Well, Carrie Ward with the Illinois Coalition Against Sexual Assault, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
When we come back, we're going to take a look at a new lawsuit filed by House Republicans against the state's legislative maps and see how they're hoping to redraw it before the next election. We'll be right back.
Capital Connection continues now.
Welcome back. Now, if you remember way back in 2021, the state passed new legislative maps, just like it does at the turn of every decade. But this time around, this map especially has faced a lot of legal action, especially at the federal court system. But now there's a different lawsuit midway through this decade being filed by House Republicans at the state Supreme Court. Joining us now is one of the representatives behind that lawsuit, House Republican Ryan Spain. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I just want to start here. Is this a, on a whim lawsuit being filed against the map, or how much work was put into this argument?
Yeah, this lawsuit, which goes straight to the Illinois Supreme Court, was the result of really years of effort, lots of research, a lot of evidence that has been created. Really for our caucus, it began after the results of the 2022 election. We saw such a strange anomaly in that election. It was the first election under Democrats' new maps. And while we had more votes cast for candidates for the Illinois House as Republicans, Democrats had a 2/3 supermajority in our legislative chamber. So that really is what started this process and caused some alarm that the nature of the maps really need to be considered differently.
Just to go off of that data point there, you showed me the numbers. They are right, but is that a fact of the map? Is that a cause from the map, or is that a cause of maybe there just not being as many competitive races in the already Democrat-controlled districts?
Well, that's another issue too. We need to have more competitive legislative races throughout the entire state. Many races are completely uncontested on both sides of the aisle, and that needs to change. That can change with a more competitive map. But anytime you see an election result with the performance of a certain caucus, in this case for 2022, or maybe a certain candidate, if you look at the performance of Donald Trump in the state of Illinois in 2024, it was quite a bit better than his previous efforts, and frankly, better than we've seen it for a Republican presidential candidate in more than 20 years. And yet there's no corresponding correlation to the legislative outcomes, and that's because of the gerrymandering of the maps, and it's something that's illegal under our state constitution.
So what exactly is the argument about what's wrong with this map? Is it just that Republicans can't win under these circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to have rigged elections that are unfair because it disenfranchises voters of all parties, not just Republican voters, and that's what we have in Illinois. and specifically because these legislative maps violate our state constitution. The Illinois state constitution includes language that doesn't exist in the U.S. Constitution, specifically that legislative districts must be compact and contiguous. That's in our state constitution. And also that elections must be free and equal. That's in our state constitution, and that's another way to say partisan gerrymandering should not be allowed.
We are in 2025 now. We have 3 elections left for this map cycle, I guess. And I'm just curious what the ideal end outcome is for this lawsuit. What are you asking the court to do with the current map?
Yeah, we wanted to file this lawsuit as quickly as we could this year, now that we've completed the 24 election from last November. Didn't want to be accused of manipulating any of the proceedings during an election cycle. That was something we were greatly frustrated that Democrats did during last year's election cycle, changing the election rules for slating and how candidates can appear on the ballot. They changed those rules in the middle of the election, and that's inappropriate to do. So what we're asking for the Illinois Supreme Court now is to intervene, to respond to the preponderance of evidence that's been presented to them and invalidate the current legislative map. And then our preferred solution and recommendation to the court is that they would appoint a special master who would oversee the redrawing of legislative districts that would actually be in compliance with our Constitution.
So let's say the court does rule that this map does not meet the standards laid out in the Constitution, but they don't have that special person there to draw the new map and to make it that independent party to draw the map. It just goes back to the legislature, correct? And then we're kind of back to square one with the whole situation, with another map to be drawn in 4 years.
I've called it very sinister gerrymandering. It's some of the most egregious violations and use of terrible gerrymandering tactics anywhere in the country. That's why we have the most non-compact legislative map than anywhere in the country. And the Supreme Court has already ruled on the topic of compactness. That's why we feel very strong that they will take up this case. They've invalidated a legislative district in the past that was ruled to be non-compact. Now we know that we have 52 legislative districts less compact than what the court has already overturned. So compactness is a problem, and just the way that for partisan political purposes, groups of voters have been manipulated from one geographic area to another without really any respect to communities of interest, municipal boundaries, and things like that.
We're definitely going to be following along with that lawsuit.
Thanks, Cole.
That will do it for us on this week's episode of Capital Connection. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week. For Capital Connection, I'm Cole Hankey.